order. Robbie Moore to move the motion.
Thank you, Mrs Vaz, and it is a pleasure to serve under your chairmanship. And I beg to move that this House has considered E-petition 638449 relating to career breaks for parents for seriously ill children. Madam Chair, no parent should have to go through the upset and anguish of seeing their child be diagnosed or suffer with a serious illness. Sadly, it is not within our power to prevent these terrible situations. But what is within our power as a legislator is to provide support and reassurance to the parents who end up in these traumatic situations and help ease not only the process but also the parents' return to work at the end of their child's treatment, or indeed throughout the child's treatment, should the individual circumstances permit. We should absolutely remember that the workplace and being in work is often more than just about money, though, of course, money is obviously very important, but work gives us a sense of purpose, a sense of belonging, and indeed normality. It can therefore be a terrible situation to be in if, as a parent, you rather unexpectedly find yourself in a position of not only losing your job, but also in a position of fearing for your child's health, sometimes with care treatment plans being longer than expected. Additional complexities may arise if the child is particularly unwell. And of course, we all know that depending on the child's illness, there may be regular appointments that need to be attended at the hospital, sometimes more often than what was originally envisaged. Or there may be a dedicated treatment centre that is sometimes further to get to than one may initially feel. So therefore, the treatment and the care that has to be provided by that parent is not sometimes known at the outset, but can be particularly a treatment plan that has to be quite onerous for some. Some children may need around-the-clock care and attention, with no other family member or friend that may be able to provide that additional care, or the parent may simply be the only person that the child has to care for them. And then, at the end of the treatment, whether it is successful or not, it can be incredibly difficult sometimes for the parent to return to the workplace. Indeed, the job may not be waiting for them at the end, ready for them to return to. The parent may struggle to get back into the job market at cost to themselves, their children, and indeed to the state. So let's take the situation of Christina Harris, the founder of this petition, who I'm honoured to say is with us in the public gallery today. Indeed, I was honoured to meet with Christina before this debate, and it's great to see her friends and indeed Skye, her child, in the public gallery with us. Skye was diagnosed during a Christmas period, and on the first day back to work, Christina was told that she wouldn't be paid, and was shocked to discover she had no statutory protection to fall back on. Skye's treatment, once diagnosed, was to take approximately 2 years. And whilst Christina's employer couldn't provide her wages during the time that Christina was caring for Skye, her employer did at least keep her role open to Christina whilst she was initially absent from work. 6 months in, Christina was asked to attend a meeting with her employer in which she felt she was almost being put in a difficult position to have with her employer. And Christina's employer was completely unwilling at start to really discuss the flexibility of working options. And after 6 months on, her employment contract was terminated, despite Christina having worked in this place for 19 years, providing 19 years of service to the same company, and still having to deal, obviously, with Skye's care. And it's great to see that Skye is on the mend and returning to a good state of health. So, struggling after a year of uncertainty, Christina was left taking part-time work to make ends meet whilst struggling with providing the care for Skye. This situation is unlike any other regarding parenthood and work. Let's take if you've had an accident, for example. Parents have access to bereavement leave. One of the better parts of the Employment Rights Bill that is coming through this House includes a right to neonatal leave and pay, easing this exact issue for newborns, but not for older children. Even in the classic case of an unplanned pregnancy after a career, parents still have 9 months to prepare. But a child can become ill at a moment's notice, and through no fault of the parents or the child themselves. And despite this, the current options for support are incredibly limited, which is why this petition has been brought forward to the House. I will give way.
Thank you. I'm very grateful to the honourable member for giving way. And he pointed out some of the increased employment rights that we potentially are going to see with the Employment Rights Bill. In the last Parliament, there was no employment rights bill brought forward, but there were private members' bills that did improve some of the situation, both flexible working by my colleague, the honourable member for Bath, but my own carers' leave bill. What this suggests is that we need to see more support for parents, paid carers' leave, so that people like Christina don't suffer in the way that you've outlined.
And I very much thank my honourable friend for her intervention. And what this does absolutely highlight is the significant importance of why this petition needs to be considered by the government and the Minister of the day, because the Employment Rights Bill that is working its way through the House does include some positive measures, and potentially this is an additional thought that the Minister should consider, given the strength of feeling behind the number of people that signed this petition. Because these situations, in the vast majority of cases, are completely unexpected. As I've said, Mrs Vaz, who knows when a child is going to become seriously ill? A diagnosis for your child can come out of the blue, and as a parent, you have to deal with it. I will give way.
Thank you, Madam Chair. You've brought to mind the occasion when my youngest son, after playing rugby, was diagnosed with what was a suspected brain tumour. And because I live in the middle of nowhere, in Somerset and Devon, the flashing blue ambulance took 2.5 hours to get to the nearest children's specialist unit. So it's not just about losing your job, it's not just about losing your wages, it's actually the enormous stress and anxiety it puts on parents, particularly in rural areas like mine. Wouldn't you agree?
And I thank the honourable member for her intervention. And absolutely, this does actually highlight the challenges that are associated, not only financial challenges that can unexpectedly be put on a parent, but indeed the emotional challenges, the anxiety-related issues for a parent having to be put in a scenario where it may be a short-term care plan that has to be put in place, or indeed something much longer. But that anxiety is absolutely there and something that needs to be recognised. A diagnosis of your child, Mrs Vaz, can come out of the blue, as I was saying, and as a parent you of course have to deal with it. You have no other choice but to make the situation work, and it of course can be incredibly difficult. Complexities will arrive with the care programme of the child, no doubt, and it will be very emotionally draining for all involved. But as a parent, you have to deal and get on with it. This injustice certainly resonates across the country. Christina's... I will give way. Yeah.
Thank you, Mrs Vaz. My honourable friend is speaking very well about the challenges and the issues in this area. It was great to be able to meet Christina and Skye before the debate started. But does my honourable friend recognise that many employers are following good practice in terms of paying parents during this time of care and also keeping jobs open? But what the petitioner is concerned about, and what I'm concerned about, is those employers who are not following good practice, and that's what the government hopefully will try and address.
Absolutely, and I thank my honourable friend for his intervention. And absolutely, this is the case, that not all employers are playing from the same hymn sheet, so to speak, with providing that good level of support and good level of care to their employers whilst they are going through very traumatic situations. And indeed, whilst there are some very good employers, not all employers are carrying out the same level of care to their employees during these difficult situations, which is why Christina's petition has been so well recognised by the amount of support it had gained, indeed gathering 102,316 signatures. In my own constituency of Keighley and Ilkley, I've received many pieces of correspondence on this very issue, and it can certainly be harrowing listening as a Member of Parliament, and I'm sure all of us have done, to some of those very real live and challenges that parents are facing in these situations. The financial challenges, the support challenges, the emotional challenges can all be there. In support of this petition, the Petitions Committee has carried out its own survey on the back of Christina's petition coming forward, asking people who had signed the survey how severe illness of children affects them as parents. And I'm thankful to the 9,609 people that submitted a response to the Petitions Committee as part of our review of the petition itself. The huge response rate, not only to the petition itself, but the follow-up demonstrates just how much of an issue this is. And I hope that the government will respond accordingly to some of the concerns that have been raised. Because the survey suggests that the majority of parents affected on this issue do manage to cope with the challenge. But crucially, this is only possible with those with understanding and accommodating employers, as has already been indicated to. I will give way.
I thank the honourable member for giving way. I recently spoke to my constituent Kat from Hassocks, whose son Teddy has battled life-threatening neuroblastoma since July 2022. Kat told me that while her employer went above and beyond to support her, she is the exception and not the rule. And with many employers either not able or not willing to do so, does the honourable member agree with me that having, in Kat's words, a total lottery as to whether parents of seriously ill children receive employment support is unacceptable?
And I thank the honourable member for her intervention. It just absolutely gets to the nub of the point of why this petition is so important and raises the case that not all employers are doing the right thing by their employees when that parent, maybe a single parent, or doesn't have any support around them, ends up in a very difficult situation where they're having to deal quite immediately with a challenge that is posed to them. And without that reassurance within the workplace, it can even greater add to that anxiety that that parent is facing. I will give way.
I'm very grateful to my honourable friend for allowing that, and thank you, Mrs Vaz. I think it's absolutely right that we do acknowledge employers who are doing this well, and I should declare register of interest. I'm a Vice President of Carers UK. They run a very important employers network which shares good practice amongst employers, and I'd urge any of the constituents who have signed the petition to get their employers linked in with that.
And Mrs Vaz, the honourable member comes on to it. She must have read my speech, because I get on to that point of just how important it is that all employers and indeed employees are aware of the rights that already exist, because there are a number of protection measures out there. It's just the challenge of actually employers and employees not necessarily knowing what's available to them, and I will certainly come on to that. Because the survey that was conducted by the Petitions Committee, as we can see, as in Christina's case, that when an employer is less flexible or outright unhelpful, as we've seen in circumstances, things quickly get worse. 99% of those respondents to the survey believed employers should be required to provide career breaks for parents of terminally ill children. What Christina and the thousands of other people are really calling out for is statutory reassurance that as soon as they are able to go back to work, the job will be available for them for at least a limited period. The reassurance that as soon as the treatment is complete, life can go back to normal is hugely important, not only to the parents for their own mental health, but also to help them plan for the financial situation going forward. Many families can afford to take short-term hit to care for their child, but not all can. But they can't do so going forward without an unknown guarantee of any time that may be associated to get back into the workplace at the end of that employment break, which is why I again reiterate the importance of this petition. This key point about reassurance was raised to me by It's Never You, a charity run by two individuals who care deeply on this issue because they had a child in their own circumstances who suffered, unfortunately, from cancer. Their loss of their own child, tragically in 2021, to this terrible illness. And when I met with them, they passionately explained to me how getting that support in place from day one is a major issue. And for the first 90 days, whilst you've had a diagnosis of a terrible illness, you have to go through an incredible amount of restructure to your life, and that 90 days from day one is crucial. To have that support from your employer is vital. As employers themselves, they are all too aware of the burden that statutory requirement to a career break would have on smaller businesses. But they highlighted to me when I was speaking to It's Never You, and completely correctly in my view, that the lack of any government-directed standard or benchmark is a recipe for chaos. And as already been indicated, many employers and employees don't necessarily know what level of support is available to them when their child can be diagnosed with a serious illness.
The honourable member give way?
I will.
I thank the honourable member for giving way. And we've heard so many stories just now of individuals who've lost their jobs as a result of taking time off from having really seriously ill children, which adds stress to an already unbearable situation. I wondered, we've heard already some stories of good employers and some stories of not so good employers, and I wondered if the Right Honourable Member would agree with me that it's really vital that we understand the extent of this situation and that the Government could commission some research into the number of families impacted each year from this, and that if we had some more information, then it would help determine a better solution.
Yeah, and I thank the Honourable Member for her intervention, and I always agree that it's okay in this place us designing, or whether it's guidance or regulation or indeed legislation that's brought out, but unless it practically works and has the positive impacts that it was designed to do so, then it can not be any benefit to anybody. So actually, the more data sets and data collection that can be available to government to make the right decisions is always, of course, welcome, and I would endorse the point that has been made. Employers and their employees can often struggle to come to an acceptable arrangement, as had been indicated by the group It's Never You. So therefore, it is important that whether through a break or a flexible working, it is important that the government outline the support that is already available to those employees and employers. We should be encouraging businesses to think outside the box. That had been highlighted, a point highlighted to me by the Rainbow Trust and CIPD in preparation for this debate, because the idea of flexible working, as they indicated to me, is vital for a parent with a sick child with complex needs. Is all so important that flexible working can be put in place, indeed part-time work. But as many employers have referenced to me in preparation for this debate, not every job environment allows flexible working to take place, and that also has to therefore be recognised, because indeed, whilst employers and good employers will do as much as they can to facilitate the needs of a parent with seriously ill children, not every job environment allows flexible working to take place. Something raised by all parties I've spoken to on this issue was just how long it can take to get support such as carer's allowance to kick in. Again, we come back to this crucial first 90 days, a period in part defined by how long it takes state aid to arrive. In the same 90 days, it is also important for parents to be able to, parents can feel completely lost in relation to what their rights are and how they can use those rights to ease the situation. Indeed, businesses may also be just as ignorant of the rights that are actually available to them, indeed the support mechanisms that are available to them. And time researching this, once a challenge is put forward to them by a parent with a seriously ill child, can delay that support being put in place. So I'd urge the government, as already been indicated, to ensure that through the best means as possible from government, that employers are well equipped with the amount of support and their rights, and indeed employers' rights, to be put out. So the first question I hope the Minister will be able to answer today is, how is the government going to ensure that employees are aware of their rights before a crisis may be put before them? Indeed, how often employers can be made aware of the obligations on them? Secondly, what work is the government undertaking to ensure that support such as carer's allowance can be delivered as quickly as possible? For many, a family's income can drop to zero overnight, and the challenge of reaching the end of the first month can be the greatest challenge. It should not be, with a doctor's note or an employment record, difficult to determine the truth of an applicant's status. And finally, the key point which has been reiterated throughout the evidence that was given to me in preparation for this debate was the fact of the change that could give, the most important change that has been indicated was certainty to those struggling families and allow them to get through and recover fast from these terrible ordeals. I hope the Minister will be able to confirm the Government is looking at providing some clarity through statutory requirements being provided for career breaks for parents of seriously ill children. We know that the Government is open to the concept through the work that has been undertaken through neonatal complications. So what logical reason can there be for this support to end an arbitrary cut-off based on the age of a child? So I hope the Minister will listen carefully to the contributions that are going to be made in this debate. And can I thank Mrs Vaz, Christina, and the over 100,000 signatories that have taken place and providing support for this debate to happen in this House. And can I thank all that have contributed to the work of the Petitions Committee in preparation for this debate, indeed those that answered the survey that was undertaken by the Petitions Committee. And I look forward to hearing from everyone and everyone's contributions in this session. Thank you.
The question is that this House has considered E-petition 638449 relating to career breaks for parents of seriously ill children. Mark Francois.
Thank you, Mrs Vaz, for calling me to speak in this important debate, and I look forward to serving under your chairmanship this afternoon. I should also like to thank my honourable friend, the member for Keenan Ilkley, for so ably introducing the debate this afternoon, and if I may say so to him, for doing it in such an empathetic manner. He also mentioned the Petitions Committee initiated a survey to gather further data on the extent of this situation, and I'd like to commend the committee for their initiative in doing this, and I will refer to some of the findings from that survey shortly. As you say, Ms Vaz, we're here today to debate E-petition 638449, which calls for career breaks for parents of seriously ill children. Perhaps I could give the House some background on what led us here this afternoon. I'm proud to say that the originator of this petition, Christina Harris, is my constituent. She emailed me back in the early summer of 2023, explaining the circumstances that she faced in trying to care for her lovely daughter, Sky, who was undergoing a course of serious medical treatment and about which her employer, a local estate agent, seemed quite unsympathetic. Having read her email, I invited her to come to one of my regular twice-monthly constituency advice surgeries, and she duly arrived there in July 2023, by which time her petition was already into 5 figures. When we met, we discussed at some length the background to Sky's condition and the pressure that it had put on Christina in trying to juggle work and family responsibilities in caring for her daughter, as any loving parent would want to do. Christina seemed to be very focused on what she was trying to achieve. She had what the military might call a very clear sense of mission, Ms Vaz, and she told me she was determined to achieve the 100,000 signature threshold in order to provoke a debate in Parliament. I must confess that while I was sympathetic to what she was trying to achieve, as I shall come on to in a minute, I did explain to Christina that achieving 100,000 signatures was no mean feat, and it could prove to be quite a challenging endeavour. Nevertheless, I'm pleased to report to the House she was completely undeterred and assured me of her absolute determination to press on. And importantly, she said this was not just for her daughter, but also on behalf of other families who find themselves in similar, very difficult circumstances. She was doing it for them too. By the autumn, Christina had made dramatic progress, and her petition had breached the 100,000 signature threshold. This resulted in her and I visiting 10 Downing Street in order to deposit a hard copy of the petition as an aid to her campaign. This subsequently generated a degree of positive publicity, including via the BBC and our local newspaper back in South Essex, The Echo, who have been very supportive. Given her tremendous efforts in this regard, I'm delighted to report that Christina is present in the gallery this afternoon to witness the debate, and that she's brought Sky with her so that she can appreciate her mother's efforts for herself. Very importantly, and with Sky's permission, I'm delighted to report that she has rung the bell and that she is now in remission, and may God grant that that remains. So as well as congratulating Christina and Sky, I should also like to place on record the fact that of the top 10 constituencies which have generated signatures in support of this petition, 4 of them are in Essex, namely Basildon and Billericay with 1,034 signatures, Castle Point with 1,304, Malden 1324, and I say this with a certain degree of pride, Ms Vaz. In my own constituency, Rayleigh and Wickford, we topped the league with 2,096 signatures, although the credit for that goes entirely to Christina and her supporters, and not to me. Unfortunately, as already been mentioned, we don't have firm statistics on how many families each year find themselves in this predicament, but it may be instructive that there were some 9,609 respondents to the Petitions Committee survey who left comments or suggestions in reply. Of that number, 12%, or 1,153, declared that they were parents or guardians in those circumstances. So it would therefore be wrong, I think, to dismiss this problem as affecting only a handful of families each year. It does appear to be wider than that. Although Skye was fortunate to receive treatment at Great Ormond Street Hospital, a world-class institution for the care of sick children, this nevertheless placed a great deal of strain on Christina and her family, and unfortunately she was ultimately dismissed by her employer because she had prioritised the care of her child over that of her career. For the record, Christina attempted to negotiate with her employer over a period of time to come up with some kind of flexible working arrangement, but nevertheless, ultimately, her employer was unsympathetic. In response to this petition, a number of parents and guardians replied with their own experiences of being in this situation, some of which, thanks to benign employers, were very positive. For instance, one wrote, I quote, "My husband and I have two separate careers in two separate fields. When our daughter was diagnosed with leukemia at 7 months old, both of our employers supported us. We were both able to take leave and be paid for the entire duration of my daughter's terminal illness. Our employer's support to us in what was literally a nightmare was the reason we were able to stay by our daughter's side at all times. She was never alone." Similarly, another respondent reported, and I quote again, "The impact of my employer's support greatly affected my ability to support my child. If my employer had not been so supportive and accommodating, the consequences of my child's diagnosis would have been far-reaching in our lives, and I am incredibly grateful." Overall, 58% of those who responded said that their employer was either supportive or very supportive when their child was seriously ill. A similar proportion, 54%, reported being granted flexible working arrangements to help care for their child. Conversely, however, 30% of respondents who were parents or guardians said that they became unemployed or stopped working during or after the period when their child was ill. As one of those reported, and I quote, "I was the sole earner, but we had young children at home as well as our sick child. I was on unpaid leave for 6 months with no financial support except from charitable help. It's taken years to climb out of the debt we were left in." Bless you, Minister. End quote. The testimony of a nurse working with families in such situations is both instructive and moving. The nurse reported, I quote, "I supported so many families as a children's palliative care nurse who have had to go to work while their child was dying due to concerns of losing their job. Some of these families then lost their job during their child's journey." So in practice, at present, so much of this seems to come down to how supportive and understanding, or not, individual employers are prepared to be in these very difficult circumstances. Such circumstances can be even more challenging for those who are self-employed and risk receiving little or no income at all if they choose to stop work to care for their child. Important to restate that 99% of the respondents to the survey agreed with the proposition that career breaks should be granted to the parents of seriously ill children. In advance of this debate, Mrs Vaz, I asked the House of Commons Library if they could provide some specialist advice on this issue and what assistance is currently available to parents in what was Christina's situation. As the Library reports, the Carers Leave Act 2023 introduced the right for employees to take up to 1 week's unpaid leave each year to care for a dependent. Now, whilst this is helpful, it in no way addresses the scale of the challenge in Christina and Skye's circumstances. I also asked for the Library's advice on whether the new Employment Rights Bill currently going through Parliament would help alleviate the problem. For the record, I do have some reservations about the overall effect of the Employment Rights Bill on the job market, and particularly on the government's growth objectives. But nevertheless, I wanted to know, on a non-partisan way, whether or not there are any specific measures in the bill that would assist parents in Christina's situation. The conclusion from the Library that came back was as follows, and I quote directly from their reply to my inquiry. Clauses 11 to 15 of the Employment Rights Bill would make some reforms to family-related leave provisions. This is primarily around removing the qualifying periods for unpaid parental leave, sometimes called ordinary parental leave and paternity leave, making them day one rights for all employees. Employees can take up to 18 weeks in total of unpaid parental leave up to their child's 18th birthday, with a maximum of 4 weeks per year for any reason related to their parental responsibilities, which could, for example, include caring for a seriously ill child. However, as the Library pointed out, there's no specific provision, even in this new legislation, to allow for a career break for a parent with a seriously ill child. As the Library put it, you ask whether the Employment Rights Bill 2024-25 includes measures to require employers to offer career breaks for parents with a seriously ill child. In short, the bill does not include such a provision. I say again to the Minister, this is not meant to be a partisan point in any way. It's just an attempt to summarise where we are in legal terms of what a parent in such terrible circumstances might or might not be entitled to. When I previously discussed this with Christina, including at my surgery, I think it's very fair to say she was well aware of the pressure on the public finances, and she therefore appreciates that any help that could be given in these circumstances would need to be finely targeted in order to protect the interests of the taxpayer. Nevertheless, given the relatively small number of families each year who would find themselves in this situation, compared, for instance, to those number of families who might qualify for parental leave following the birth of a newborn, the public expenditure implications of any ameliorative action should be relatively modest. Moreover, Christina's proposal is that a career break could even be unpaid if that is the only way the employer could afford to keep the job open. The employer might employ someone else to fill that role in the intervening period, but Christina is not suggesting that the employer would have to necessarily pay that person that was filling in plus the person having the career break as well. Given all of this, I'd be genuinely interested to hear from the Minister what proposals, if any, the government are looking at to assist Christina and other families in a similar situation, and specifically, as she's gone to all this time and trouble, what is the government's attitude to Christina's suggestion, and that of all the signatories to the petition and the respondents to the survey, that career breaks should be provided for the parents of seriously ill children? So in summary, Mrs Vaz, I wish to place on record my admiration for my constituent Christina Harris and her daughter Skye in bringing this very important issue to Parliament. When I first met Christina 2 years ago, she told me she was absolutely determined to achieve 100,000 signatures or more on her petition, and I commend her for having succeeded today and for coming along with her daughter to witness these proceedings for herself. She is thus seeing the results of her efforts. I emphasise again, there's a relatively small number of families each year who find themselves in these very challenging circumstances, and therefore the public expenditure implications of any very targeted relief to aid those parents who have seriously ill children, which makes it very difficult for them to work, should be relatively modest. Indeed, Christina has suggested that granting a career break should even be unpaid if that is the only way of an employer keeping their job open. That being the case, I do hope that the Minister when he sums up, could provide at least some comfort to Christina and hold out hope for a solution to both her and Sky, and, crucially, also for other families who may find themselves in very similar challenging circumstances. Finally, I'd like to thank more than 2,000 of my own constituencies in Rayleigh and Wickford, plus all those others across Essex and indeed across the United Kingdom who took the time and trouble to add their names to the petition which has led to this debate today. It's a very good example of people power in action, and I hope it will yet lead to a positive outcome, not just for Christina, but for other families in a serious situation. Thank you, Mrs Vance.
Robin Swan.
Thank you very much, Mr. President. It's a pleasure to serve under your chairmanship, and can I thank the honourable member for Keenan Eakley for moving this debate this afternoon, but also pay tribute to Christina for starting her petition and bringing it to the floor of this chamber, but also to wish Sky continuing good health in regards to where she's been able to find her health as well. Ms Vaz, no parent should have to choose between work and supporting a sick child, either through a terminal illness, a life-limiting illness, or a serious illness that leads to that extended stay within a hospital facility. As was mentioned earlier on in regards to It's Never You, in regards to both Siri and Francis Menai Davis, who supported that charity, but also petitioned in here and have brought representation in regards to Hughes Law. Ms Vaz, under their research and some of the figures that they actually provided to the briefings, where they had estimated that this actually affected up to 4,000 children per year across the UK, actually spending 60 days or more in hospital. So in regards to the numbers that are there are those rough estimates that have already been established. But while those numbers of 4,000 sick children may seem small in regards to what our health service works with, what they support and what they cover, that is 4,000 families that experience the like of the challenge that Christina and Sky's families have brought forward. Ms Vaz, I will deviate slightly in regards to that, because I just want to it's that personal experience, I think, that so often shapes debate in around here in regards to how we bring forward presentation. Our own son, our youngest son, Evan, was diagnosed pre-birth with a congenital heart defect, a single kidney and atresia of the bowel. We were told before Evan's birth that we could expect an extended stay in hospital to support him through his initial stages of life. Ms Vaz, he celebrated his first birthday in hospital. He actually spent 13 months of his life initially in the Barbara ward in the Children's Hospital in Belfast, and I want to pay tribute to, like I'm sure many parents, those workers on those children's wards who take on that carrying an additional responsibility in regards to the additional strains that are put on a family life in regards to that point as well, because although today's petition looks to the financial implications that come with having a child in hospital over an extended period, there are also those emotional challenges that come across many families as well, as to how they try to find out not just a work-life balance, but a family life balance as well, because many have other children at home who need those supports as well. So I do value the strength of what has been brought here today in regards to what this place should actually be about, and bringing about those supports for families and individuals at a very local, very specific, very individual basis, because surely if we're being elected to that place, this is what we should be about. And I want to thank the member for Rayleigh and Wickford in regards to encouraging bringing this debate and bringing the petition forward, because the subsequent surveys have indicated just how crucial this issue is. But where the implication, and I look forward to the Minister's responses, there is an expectation on government that surely we could do something for those families and those children who find themselves in that circumstance, because unfortunately what we now do as a government and as politicians and as a health service is actually leave that to be carried by charities, by families. And I speak experience, again, as a former health minister in Northern Ireland who dealt with these occasions and these circumstances. We actually had the Northern Ireland Children's Health Coalition, which was 13 local charities who came together to look for a young patients fund, which would actually support financially parents in regards to this as well. But if it's really the best that we can do is to look to charities to carry that work forward, I think there's a feeling in what we want to be about, and I think what this government wants to be about. Ms Vaz, they estimated that the financial cost to a family was £351 per day that they have to find. So I know there is that suggestion that even that unpaid leave from someone in work would be welcome. I think we also have to look to what that call is from Hughes Law in regards to actually supplying that financial support as well, because surely if there's anything about this place in regards to the response to this petition today is how we can support those families, how we can support those children, so that we can take part of that financial stress away, which also alleviates that emotional stress that is put on the parents and on families of those supporting those children who see those extended stays in hospitals. So in closing, can I thank the Petitions Committee for bringing this forward, the contributors today, but especially to Christina for starting this initiative and today to get this debate to this place.
I call Lib Dem spokesperson Clive Jones.
It's a pleasure to serve under your chairship, Ms Vaz, and I extend my thanks to the honourable member for Keighley and Ilkley for opening the debate so eloquently. Like so many others in this debate, I want to start by acknowledging Christina's heartbreaking story. Because while receiving my cancer diagnosis was hard and it changed my life and the lives of my family, it was something that was happening to me, but was having an equal effect, or greater effect, on both of my two teenage daughters. And I just can't imagine having those roles reversed. That must be very, very, very difficult. I and my Liberal Democrat colleagues send our sincerest hopes and best wishes for a full recovery for Skye. And I am so pleased that you've had the opportunity to ring the bell. The emotional turmoil that Christina and your wider family must have gone through in those first few hours, weeks and months is just unimaginable. And yet through all of that, she has campaigned to ensure that people in the future receive better support than she did, to correct an injustice. It is selfless, it's brave, because she has identified a real problem that exists in our society, that families of chronically ill children are not adequately supported by the government. They are forced to stop focusing exclusively on their child and instead to stress about finances from day one. A cancer diagnosis, for example, introduces new unavoidable costs, from transport to energy to food to accommodation, which Young Lives versus Cancer predicts costs an average extra £700 a month, on top of household incomes falling by an average of £6,000 a month. While there are options like taking sick leave, compassionate leave, or reducing working hours, these options eventually become exhausted, and they're not options that everybody can take up. These provisions are not intended to be used when you have an unwell child. These losses in income and steps taken to try to juggle work and caring come despite there being a social security system. It is distinctly difficult. It is a distinctly difficult experience to navigate. And yet the existing support available is just not enough. There are numerous problems with the existing system that categorically means that it does not work. The 3-month qualifying period that young cancer patients go through leave them waiting for support after a diagnosis, incurring an average of £2,000 additional cancer-related costs and losing an average of $1,500 to $2,500 of household income before they can even apply for any support. Some families have to remortgage their house because costs have been overwhelming. Research from Young Lives versus Cancer also highlights that nearly half of parents couldn't access flexible working arrangements, and 3 in 5 parents felt they had to go back to work before they were ready. Many will have found this extremely stressful. It's why I support the campaign for Hughes Law, because there needs to be some form of day one financial support for parents, instead of having to battle through bureaucracy and impossible choices. There is a precedent for providing this support. When a child is born, parents who stop working to care for newborns receive financial support through maternity leave. From 2023, the Neonatal Care Act, which provides parents of sick newborns with up to 12 weeks of paid leave in addition to maternity or paternity leave. Why should it be different for those parents who need to stay with their seriously ill child who is no longer a small baby? I call on the government to look further into the proposals set forward in the petition, and to refer back to the House so that its full merits can be debated. Throughout this debate, honourable members have raised that the United Kingdom needs a thorough modernisation of its employment rights and needs to improve workplace protections that would benefit parents of seriously ill children. The Liberal Democrats have led the way in this debate. Not this particular one, but the overall debate. My honourable friend, the member for North East Fife, introduced the Carers Leave Act 2023, legislation that created an entitlement for employees to be absent from work on unpaid leave, to provide or arrange care for a dependent with a long-term care need. Unpaid carers are the backbone of our society. Millions of people care for loved ones, doing everything from day-to-day physical caring, washing, dressing and feeding. Yet far too many unpaid carers go without adequate support and struggle to balance caring responsibilities and work. Many people across the country have made the difficult decision to leave their jobs because they simply cannot make it work. I'm proud that the Carers Leave Bill provided greater support, providing people with the flexibility that they need. But let's also be clear, these changes benefit employers as well, leading to reduced recruitment costs and improved retention and well-being. I will do, yes.
Thank you. Yeah. Thank you for giving way, and just to thank you again for this debate being called. The Demelza Hospice in my constituency of Sittingbourne and Sheppey have come to me a lot with this particular issue. Relating to employers, the interactions between employment and health and well-being are actually very complicated and multifaceted. And some of the things that parents or any worker gets from their employment are structure, relationships, support in the workplace, a sense of well-being. How does the member envisage juggling these dynamics so that actually people don't lose all of the benefits that they get from employment and employers, not just the financial ones, but that much wider package of where they sit in society and how they operate in their lives day to day? Because obviously there is a danger that people can, because some of these conditions are a very long time, they can lose those connections with the workplace and lose their acuity in the workspace as well.
Yeah, thank you very much for your intervention. You're absolutely right. Somebody could be off work for quite a long time. But that person needs to have the support of their employer. Very often they could have been working for the employer for quite some time. So they have built up a history with that employer. 99.9% of the time, it will be a good history with that employer. and they should be supported, but the government has to be helping with that support. It can't just be on the employer, especially in a case where it is over an extended period. So, I would like to know what steps is the government taking to encourage employers to do the right thing and offer career breaks. Will the government review the proposals set forward in the petition and come back to the House with a debate to discuss its merits? What additional support is the government considering offering families of seriously ill children? Thank you, Ms. Vaz.
Thank you. Opposition spokesperson Dame Harriet Baldwin.
Thank you very much indeed, Ms Vaz. And this debate on the petition has highlighted an unimaginably difficult situation where one's child is seriously ill. And in a series of important speeches and interventions, the member for Keighley and Ilkley, Rayleigh and Wickford, South Antrim, and others have highlighted specific examples of the very difficult situation that occurs not only in one's own family with one's own child being sick, but also in terms of one's employment. And as my honourable friend highlighted, his constituent Christina Harris and her campaigning on behalf of this cause after experiencing a very difficult situation when her daughter Sky fell ill, the reality of this across the country has really sunk home. I think one is immediately struck with a view that what employer would not be incredibly supportive of an employee who finds themselves in this hopefully rare situation. But as we've heard in today's debate, not every employer is necessarily supportive. There's not a consistency of support, and many employers don't know the law in this area. So for the benefit of the record, I thought I would set out the statutory support that parents currently have. Through the Maternity and Parental Leave Regulations of 1999, all employees are given, with 1 year's qualifying service, are given the right to take unpaid parental leave. And this entitlement is up to 18 total weeks at any point in the child's first 18 years of life, with up to 4 weeks maximum in any individual year. And this leave can be taken for any purpose connected with looking after a child, which could, of course, include caring for a seriously ill child. This provision is, I understand, set to change with the government's Employment Rights Bill, which will give parents a right from day one to start taking 18 weeks of unpaid leave to care for their child until the child turns 18. However, it's important to note that while the bill will provide a day one right, it will not address the circumstances outlined in the petition of mandating a career break specifically for parents of seriously ill children. And while some of the measures in the Employment Rights Bill are well-intentioned, the bill as a whole is problematic because it increases the already heightened pressure that employers are facing and businesses are facing, further to Labour's budget of broken promises. Through the National Insurance Jobs Tax, the hike in business rates, the incoming employment regulations, the Labour government is sharply hiking the cost of doing business and employing staff. Indeed, the Employment Rights Bill alone is set to cost £156 per employee. But you don't need to listen to me, Ms Vaz. The chairman of the CBI has stated that the new employment regulations would hamper growth and cause job losses. The government's own impact assessment on its workers' rights package estimates it will cost companies £5 billion a year. And alongside this, I think not only will they not employ, I think they will let people go. I think there could be quite an ugly rush before some of these things come into force, and arguably we are beginning to see some of that in the employment statistics recently, which have been disappointing. The previous government supported legislation which provides support for parents, including those caring for ill children or facing other difficult circumstances. To summarise some of the measures the previous government took, it supported the Neonatal Care Leave and Pay Act 2023, which gained royal assent in May of that year. In January 2025, the government announced that from April 2025, parents would receive a day one right to additional time off for those with babies in neonatal care. The regulations built on the work of the previous government, and we welcome the government continuing this. The previous government also supported the Employment Relations Flexible Working Act, which passed in July 2023. This increased the number of requests for flexible working an employee can make in a year, reduced the time an employer has to administer a request, and requires an employer to consult with the employee if they are going to reject the request. The previous government also supported the Carers Leave Act 2023. Since coming into force, all employees are entitled to up to 1 week's unpaid carers leave every year to provide or arrange care for any dependents who have care needs due to a disability, old age or physical or mental illness or injury expected to last at least 3 months. And this could give some parents of seriously ill children an additional week's leave each year on top of their unpaid parental leave entitlement. So that, Ms Vaz, is a summary of things as they currently stand. This petition was submitted during the previous Parliament, and the previous government replied, and I quote, "We understand the difficulties, worries and challenges faced by parents with seriously ill children. While we're very sympathetic, it's not practical to provide a specific right for parents with seriously ill children to take a career break. Nonetheless, we would encourage employers to go further and consider what compassionate leave policies they have, including flexible working arrangements and supportive work environment, so that they may be able to offer beyond that which is required by legislation alone." And there we left it, Ms Vaz, at the time of the election, and so I leave it to the new Minister to outline what his government plans to do.
Thank you. Minister Justin Madders.
Thank you, Ms Vaz. It's a pleasure to see you in the chair this afternoon. Can I start by congratulating the Honourable Member for Keighley and Ilkley for securing today's debate and for the very thoughtful way he's presented the issues. And of course, I would like to thank Christina Harris, who started the petition and as was pointed out, did an incredible job in getting it to that 100,000 mark. And we've obviously all now heard the story of why she had to stop work to care for Sky. And it's great to see both of them here today. And it was good to hear about the positive news about Sky's condition. And as we heard, 19 years with an employer was not rewarded, I think, with the loyalty that she has shown that company. But obviously we can't rewrite history in terms of that. We can discuss what support is available and what we might be able to do in the future. And I think we all understand the unimaginable difficulty of having a seriously ill child and all the consequences that come from that. So I think honourable members have spoken very well about the difficulties families face in those situations, and I think the contributions have been heartfelt and serious. The honourable member for Keighley and Ilkley talked about work being more than just about money. My honourable friend also mentioned that in his intervention. I think that's absolutely right. That is, there are other benefits to working that go beyond simply financial reward, or of course we don't want to underplay that. And he also talked about the anxiety that having a seriously ill child can bring, and clearly nobody wants to add to that anxiety by having uncertainty with your employment prospects on top. The honourable member for Braley and Whitford, of course, spoke very eloquently as the constituency member for Christina about the campaign that she'd run. He also highlighted, I think, some of the interesting survey results, which encouragingly indicated a majority of employees do the right thing, but also, unfortunately, a sizable minority do not. I want to thank the Honourable Member for South Antrim, who spoke powerfully about his own personal experiences, and he set out the emotional challenges, not just to the individual person in the employment relationship we're talking about, but to the whole family when there is a seriously ill child. And I was grateful to him for highlighting the work of the charity sector that supports so many families in this very difficult situation. And of course, he was right that in an ideal world we would not want people to have to rely on charity in these difficult situations. The Liberal Democrat spokesperson spoke about the financial impact of this issue and the delays in the benefit system, and I'll certainly pass on his comments to the Department for Work and Pensions. And the opposition spokesperson was right to highlight some of the work that her government did in office in terms of this area. Clearly there is more to do, which is why we have introduced the Employment Rights Bill, and whilst you may reel off some opposition to it, of course the CBI used to oppose the minimum wage, and we all know how that turned out. So I want to start by recognising the dedication and compassion of parents and carers across the country, and recognise that they make a vital contribution to society, supporting those who need it at the most critical time. And sadly, when people are in that situation, they may have to stop work altogether. They may not get a choice as to whether they stop work altogether. Just half of all adult carers are in work, and a quarter are economically inactive. And evidence indicates that disabled or unwell children are more likely than disabled adults to need continuous care. We also know that more than half of those who provide over 10 hours of care a week report it impacting on their work. This suggests that, as we've heard, the parents of seriously ill children face distinct challenges in balancing work and caring responsibilities. And given it is clearly an issue, it's important we think about how to support carers and parents of seriously ill children to balance those responsibilities with other parts of their life, including work. And as the Honourable Member for Keighley and Ilkley said, there do appear to be issues about some of the awareness of what support is already available to parents. So I thought it would be helpful to follow the lead of the opposition spokesperson and just outline what there is available and what there will be available coming on stream shortly. So, as has been mentioned, all employee parents are entitled to 18 weeks of unpaid parental leave over the first 18 weeks of 18 years of a child's life. This can be taken in blocks of 4 weeks or for longer periods if there is agreement with the employer. And as we've already mentioned, the Employment Rights Bill will bring this forward to become a day one entitlement. Parents of a child who is disabled or living with a long-term health condition are also entitled to carers leave, as we've discussed. This can be taken flexibly in half or whole days or in one go over the course of a year. And in line with our plans to make work pay, we are intending to review carers leave. As members will be aware, it's only been in force just under a year, so there are some way to go to understand exactly how successful it has been in supporting carers in the workplace. And we're also be engaging closely with smaller employers and sector bodies through this work to ensure that we fully understand the potential impacts and benefits that further policy development could bring. As has been mentioned as well, Ms Vaz, from April this year, employees who are parents of babies in neonatal care will have access to a new entitlement to up to 12 weeks of neonatal care leave and pay. This includes a day one right of up to 12 weeks of neonatal care leave, as well as a pay entitlement for eligible employees. We believe this will enable thousands of parents to care for and be with their children in neonatal care without worrying about whether their job is at risk. And another area where I think there will be more support coming down the line is through the Employment Rights Bill and through improved access to flexible working. This will help balance work and other responsibilities, for example, in the situation where there is a need for care for a child. And it was interesting to hear that in Christina's story, the employer just wouldn't have that discussion about flexibility. Hopefully, this new right to flexible working will lead to a different kind of conversation in the future with people who are in that awful situation. There are already also existing protections in the Employment Rights Act for employees suffering either detriment as a result of taking leave for family and domestic reasons, or where an employee is dismissed where family-related leave is the principal reason. In addition, parents of seriously ill children may also be protected from employment discrimination by association with a disabled person under the Equality Act 2010. Of course, employment rights are only one part of the much wider package of support available to families where a child is seriously ill. The Accelerating Reform Fund provides a total of £42.6 million over 2023-24 and 2024-2025 to support innovation and scaling adult social care and improve services provided for supporting unpaid carers. A range of financial support is both available through Social Security, help is provided via Disability Living Allowance for children aged under 16 and personal independence payments for those aged 16 and above. These benefits are available if a child or young person's condition or illness is both of a long-term nature and gives rise to daily care or mobility needs. These benefits are a contribution to the extra costs that may arise that we've heard about, and for those in receipt of the highest level of benefit, this means an extra £9,583 a year tax-free. These benefits are usually paid to the parent of the child to help with the overall family finances, and they're free to use the money as they see fit. The Honourable Member for Keighley and Oakley mentioned that it can take some time to actually access some of these benefits. I think several members actually mentioned that point. But where there is a tragic end-of-life diagnosis, claims are fast-tracked and recipients are guaranteed the highest rated DLA care component or the enhanced rated PIP daily living component from the date of the claim. And we've recently announced, Ms. Vaz, that from April of this year there will be an increase in the carers allowance weekly earnings limit from £151 a week to £196. That's the equivalent of 16 hours at the national living wage. This is the largest ever increase in the earnings limit since the carers allowance was first introduced in 1976, and will mean that carers can earn up to £10,000 a year while still retaining their carers allowance, which is worth around an additional £2,000 a year. This is some of the work that's being undertaken. I understand that some members wish to go further. There is, I think, as this debate has highlighted, a number of important issues that need to be considered about the scope of any such approach that will be taken and what such an entitlement would look like in practice. I think certainly a need to fully understand the extent of the issue. I think we need to consider the length of time that would be being requested, whether that would be paid or unpaid, the process that would need to be followed, who would be eligible to make such an application, and indeed whether other interventions may actually be more effective than such an entitlement as we've talked about today. Yeah.
I thank the Minister for giving way and for his generous remarks about some of the speeches that he's heard this afternoon. And for the record, Mrs Vazzi, to take the trouble before the debate began to introduce himself to my constituent, which I'm sure was appreciated. I've heard what he's just said. Now, I was a minister once, and sometimes in a debate like this, you go away afterwards and you think, do you know what, I think they might have a point. So on that, in that hope, would the Minister, having heard what he's just said about looking at potential solutions, which we welcome, would he be prepared to meet with my constituent, perhaps myself, ideally before Easter, just to have an exploratory conversation based on this debate with him and his officials to see what the art of the possible might be. He's met my constituent informally. Would he now be prepared to meet her formally and at least to have that discussion? I'd be very grateful if he'd say yes.
Well, as a former minister, he will know that the best way to get a minister to agree to a meeting is to ask them directly in the chamber. Of course, I'll be happy to do that. And I am going to just explain a little bit more about what we're looking at in this area, Ms Vaz. I recently met with Minister Kinnock from the Department of Health and Social Care and Minister Tinners from the Department of Work and Pensions about how we're going to improve the lot of carers and try and make some progress in this area. We are determined to ensure there are meaningful improvements, and certainly the issues that we've discussed tonight will be fed into that. We want to make sure that unpaid carers are able to navigate their responsibilities and stay in employment if at all possible. So there is ongoing work in government about the wider programme that we can do, and certainly what we've heard tonight is going to add to that. And maybe when I've met the member for Rayleigh and Crayford, Rayleigh and Wickford, I may have further thoughts to submit to the machine. But I think it's fair to say that, that there is a lot going on in this area. There's a lot to consider. It is an important subject. It's one of the most difficult times in anyone's life when a child is seriously ill, and we want to make sure that we're getting the balance right and support for parents in that very difficult time.
Thank you, Minister. Robbie Moore to wind up.
Thank you, Mrs Vaz. And can I just sum up by thanking Christina? Because without Christina, and indeed the circumstances that she's brought to this House, we would not have this petition. We wouldn't have had the over 100,000 signatures that have attached themselves to this petition, and therefore we would not have had this debate. So on behalf of the Petitions Committee, can I not only thank Christina, but also Sky for your absolute courage and endeavour throughout the incredibly difficult challenges that you've had as a family. And on behalf of the Petitions Committee, thank you for bringing this debate forward, because it has been a really robust debate, I think, in the politest of senses, in terms of the subjects that have been covered, because there has been real recognition that not only does there need to be more data that is collected so that we can make sure that the legislation that is being introduced by government is practically workable on the ground. We've also covered off the fact that not every employer is necessarily doing the right things within their own obligations that they have. And it's good to see that the government have recognised that there is more work that needs to be done in terms of making sure that every employer, but also employee, knows the obligations that they have to one another, so that should those difficult circumstances arise where a child is ill, that we can get the best protection put out as quickly as possible by the employer to meet those needs. Also, I would just like to reiterate the fact that the Employment Rights Bill does have space to potentially be improved based on the concerns that have been raised throughout this debate. And it's good to hear that the Minister, through the appropriate Member of Parliament, my Right Honourable Member for Rayleigh and Wickford, has guaranteed a meeting. So let all petitioners who have signed this debate be well aware that there is a meeting that will follow this, and we can only hope that there will be good outcomes that come from that meeting. And the final point that I just want to raise is the importance of where carers' allowance is there for carers to be able to be permitted to have it, that they shouldn't just have to wait for end-of-life prognosis for the payment to be fast-tracked. This should be, the government machinery should be able to operate much quicker, so that any child who is ill is able, the carer is able to get that allowance as quickly as possible, most certainly within the 90-day period, not having to wait last minute. So on behalf of the Petitions Committee, can I thank all members who have contributed, and not least Christina and also Sky and their friend for attending the petitions debate. So thank you.
The question is that this House has considered E-petition 638449 relating to career breaks for parents of seriously ill children. As many as are of that opinion say aye. Aye. Of the contrary, no. I think the ayes have it. The ayes have it. Order, order. The sitting stands adjourned.